Let's build a one-wide tileable multi-item slot sorter, also known as a MIS. Tiling these next to each other will give you a super-duper compact storage system that you can infinitely expand. You can wrap them around corners or build them in any shape or orientation. Before we build it, let's talk about some really important things, such as what is a MIS sorter? It uses the slots in a chest in order to sort items. Because of that, every single chest in your entire storage system must have at least one item in every slot. No empty slots throughout the entire system. It's perfect for sorting a multitude of diverse items down into single chests. But when it comes to bulk storage for common items, such as cobblestone, a MIS is not really the way to go. Now you can just have 10 chests specifically for cobblestone, or you can just add a single filter before your MIS specifically for cobblestone. It ends up being faster, more compact, and easier to use, just having a single filter for your common items, and then using a smaller MIS to sort for the diverse or the rare items, combining the systems to get the best of both worlds. I would highly recommend just having a small MIS for the rare and diverse items, and then use bulk filters before that for all of the common items and things that you use all of the time. Now, if you want cheap, my original MIS sorter is as cheap as it gets, but the chests are front facing, whereas this one is a little bit more expensive, but it is one wide tileable and can use sideways chests. Now, essentially all we're doing to make a MIS work is we're locking and unlocking every other hopper pushing into the storage chests. So there are a bunch of different ways that we can accomplish this. It is a little awkward, but we can use pistons, we can use hopper droppers, we can split it and use torches. Everything I experimented with, other than the copper bulbs, had some major downsides. Like this hopper dropper one is very susceptible to lag spikes, changing the timings of the item moving in between the hopper and dropper. This one, with the torches, we have to split the front part, which will mess with our designs. And all of these were much slower than the copper bulb one. We had to have a much longer delay on our clock. Whereas the copper bulb one, we can get away with a 4-tick delay on the clock. So it's the best one that I could come up with. We also have this simple timer system that will make sure that items aren't left idle in the back transport lines. This will keep the MIS active long enough to clear all of the items. It works the exact same as this configuration that I built for my previous design, except that this new one is much smaller and simpler. So if you happen to build one of my previous MIS sorters and used the fancy complex input, just know that you can replace that with the one we're building in this video. The last thing to mention is actually the most important, and that is we do not want to have a chunk border in between the copper bulbs. We don't want to split the front bulbs from the back bulbs using a chunk border, or it could misalign the system. We can have chunk borders anywhere else, in between the slices, in between anything except for in between these two center copper bulbs. The build area is going to be 11 blocks wide, dug down 1 on the back 9 rows. Now, even though you can build this to be as big as you want and in any orientation, the max size for one single section is going to be 32 blocks long. But again, you can expand this out, you can curve it around, you can loop it around, zigzag it in any orientation that you want. So it's not actually limited to being 32 blocks long. We'll talk more about that later on. What is important is that we have 4 blocks of space to the left of the first system for our input, our clock and our timer. So our input chest is going to go right here 4 blocks from the left side. And this could be sideways or front facing. Or we could just not even use a chest and connect this MIS directly to a pre-existing storage system. or connect it to filters or shulker loaders or whatever. The storage chests for the miss sorter are going to go over here on these front 2 blocks. And all of these chests are going to be sideways. You can have as many as you want vertically and horizontally, but we're going to start off by building a single slice first. So pick how many vertical chests you want. You could have 1, 2, 3, 9, 10, 5, 6, it doesn't matter. But we're going to place hoppers pointed into the backs of all of these chests on this row. Then 3 blocks behind the hopper, we want droppers pointed up. That will be 1 block taller than your tallest chests. Regardless of how many chests you used, there will be 1 dropper above your topmost chest, and then 2 droppers below your chests, because there's a hole back here. And these droppers will be 4 blocks from the back and 4 blocks from the front of the hole. Now we just want to place 4 hoppers down here at the bottom, pointed into the bottom dropper, and then a 5th hopper pointed down into those. Now we want a copper bulb of any oxidation in this corner, and then every other space going up next to the droppers. So the top bulb will either be next to your top dropper or next to the second dropper from the top, depending on if you had an even or odd number of chests. Then place a torch in between each bulb, then break those torches so that all of these bulbs are turned on. Now we want more bulbs diagonally in between the first row. And your topmost bulb, whether that's on the front or the back, needs to be aligned with the topmost dropper. So you have a zigzag of bulbs that's aligned 1 block above the number of chests that you have. So your topmost bulb will either be on the front or the back, depending on if you have an even or odd number of chests. But we just need a torch on the side of the dropper aligned with each of the front bulbs. So now the bulbs should be opposite of each other, where the front row is turned on and the back row is turned off. Now we need solid blocks that provide light, so like jack-o'-lanterns or frog lights. And we want these blocks to be aligned with the backmost bulbs, but here in the front. Now you could use regular solid blocks that don't provide light if you really want to, but they will help prevent light updates from the bulbs and the torches. But you can't use sea lanterns or glowstone because those are not solid blocks. We want a comparator that is looking at every single bulb. So all of the comparators will be facing toward the front and will be next to one of the bulbs. So every bulb has a comparator, which means that the topmost comparator will be 1 block above your topmost chest. Then above the hoppers, we need a hopper pointed toward the back, either pointed at a comparator or pointed at the block, depending on if you had an even or odd number of chests. So if you have an odd number of chests, your top configuration will be slightly different than what you see. The important part is that we have a hopper, a bulb, and a comparator above your topmost chest. But that's it for a single cell, except for the connecting top section. But in order to build that, we need to build more of these slices. So start off by placing your chests. Decide how many chests you want horizontally. You can only have up to 29 chests in a single horizontal section. So for now, don't go above 29 chests horizontally. We'll talk more about extending, duplicating, and rearranging this near the end of the video. And of course, you can always have less. You don't have to build the full size. In fact, I would recommend only having maybe 10 horizontal cells. Totally up to you though. But go ahead and place the hoppers in the backs of those chests, the back wall of droppers, the bottom layer of hoppers pointed into the droppers to feed them. But for this middle section, because the copper bulbs need to be inverted front to back, and because comparators are directional, it can be a little awkward to build. So start off just by placing the back row of bulbs. Place in your torches, then break those torches, so that you're left with a back row of bulbs that are all turned on. Then next to the bottom row, we're going to place in the comparators. So just place in the comparators looking at the bottommost row of bulbs. Then above these comparators, we're going to place in the row of bulbs, but do it 4 at a time so that we can place the torches on the backs of those droppers right there. And make sure that all of these bulbs are inverted, front to back. The back ones should be opposite of the front ones. And just work your way across, doing it 4 at a time. Now you could technically place the entire row of bulbs, then enter crawl mode to place all the torches in that tiny hole. But for the comparators, we want to make sure to place these as we go, since all of the comparators need to be facing toward the front. So you need to look at the front of the machine when you place those comparators to make sure that they are pointed toward the front. But just continue working your way until you have the back section completely done. And then for the front part, it's just the light source solid blocks with comparators on top. So just place your row of frog lights or jack-o'-lanterns, then place comparators on top of that facing toward the front, then place another light block above the comparator, and then jump up there and build that row. Again, the important parts are that all of the comparators are pointed toward the front, and that each slice of bulbs, front to back, are opposite from each other. Like if one slice is inverted from another one, that's totally fine. That won't affect anything at all. We just want to make sure that the front bulbs are the opposite of the bulbs diagonally behind them. But then place this top row of hoppers either pointed into these comparators or pointed into the blocks, depending on if you have an even or odd number of chests. We just want to make sure those hoppers are not pointed down. Then on top of this first hopper, the one closest to your input, we're going to place either a single chest or a barrel. I would recommend using barrels so that they're easily distinguishable. But then next to that, we're going to place a double chest and then alternate between barrels and double chests, going all the way across. So the one closest to your input will be a barrel, and then it will alternate between double chests and barrels going all the way across. Now aligned with every barrel, we want a dropper facing toward that barrel on top of our droppers. Then a hopper pointed into the side of the double chest, then connected over to the dropper. So the dropper is connected to the double chest through those 3 hoppers. Then aligned with every double chest, we want a dropper facing up on top of our droppers. Then we want a hopper pointed down into the next barrel and then over above the chest, going over to this dropper that's pointed up. So the dropper is connected to the next barrel through those 6 hoppers. And this is the pattern we're going to do all the way across. So droppers facing toward the barrels, and then droppers facing up, aligned with the chests. And none of these hoppers will be above each other, because we don't want the hoppers to pull from each other. So every barrel alignment will have a hopper pointed into the chest, connected to the sideways dropper. And then every chest alignment will have a hopper pointed down into the barrel, then over to above the chest, and then back over the droppers. So when you're done, the entire top section will be covered in hoppers that are not overlapping. Then this far dropper that isn't connected to anything is going to connect to our overflow. So we just need some chests that have hoppers pointed into them to catch the items that aren't being sorted or that skip the system for whatever reason. And whether this dropper is facing up or facing toward the front doesn't matter. We just need to connect hoppers from that dropper over to those new chests without overlapping any of the hoppers. Now, if this isn't the end of your system, if you're going to build another one of these to create a corner, or you're going to build another one on the opposite side of the room, then you don't need an overflow. That dropper will connect to the first barrel of the new system, the barrel that's up at the top. But before going over that, we need to build the redstone and the clock. So go back over to the side that is going to be your input, and we need another row of droppers next to the existing ones, going all the way up, with the top dropper aligned with the top droppers, but pointed up. And we need to connect that dropper over to the barrel, just like we did before. So from that top dropper over to the barrel. Now, one difference on this side, other than not needing the bulbs, is we're just going to run items from this input chest over to that dropper elevator, using some hoppers. So we don't even need the dropper below that. Or if you're planning on hooking this up to a different kind of system, like having filters before it, or shulker unloaders, or shulker loaders, you don't need this input chest because you have an alternative input. And that alternative input will connect in the same way as what you see here. You'll have the filters or the unloader connected to that bottom dropper via hoppers. That bottom dropper is all that's really important. No matter what input you connect this to, that bottom dropper is going to be the same. Diagonally down from that dropper, we're going to place a block with a comparator that is looking at that dropper. So that comparator will see any items that enter the system. So even if you used an alternative input, it still needs to feed into the dropper that that comparator is looking at. But then we want a sticky piston holding a block of redstone with two hoppers that are pointed into each other, below where that block of redstone can be pushed by the sticky piston. Then next to the backmost hopper, we want a comparator on subtraction mode. So make sure that little light is turned on. Going into a solid block, with a solid block one block away from that, with a repeater in between those on a max delay. With two redstone dust next to that block and repeater, and then a redstone torch on the side of this block, with a repeater from that torch going into a solid block that will be next to that hopper. Then a target on the other side of that hopper. That torch, repeater, block, and target just slow down the clock by occasionally locking that hopper. Depending on how big you made this system, we need to load in items into these hoppers that are pointed into each other. And the number of items that you need will depend on how big you made this. At most, you can load in 4 stacks plus 63. But you cannot load in 5 total stacks of items, or any more than that. This is the most that you can put in. But you might not need this many items. All this does is keep the machine on after the last item has cleared the first dropper. So when you're totally done, just place in one item that won't be sorted out by the system, and see when that item makes it to your overflow. If the machine stays on after that item makes it to the overflow, you can remove items from those hoppers. Now, one block above the floor, so aligned with the second row of droppers, we're going to place 2 rows of blocks behind those droppers. Then we're going to do the same thing going up on every other dropper. So every other dropper will have 2 rows of blocks behind it. And we're going to keep doing this until we either have 1 or 2 droppers here at the top, just depending on if you have an even or odd number of chests. But one repeater will power the dropper above and below the dropper it's pointed into. So we just need to make sure that there's no more than 2 droppers here at the very top. If you have an even number of chests, you'll have 2 droppers up here, or if you have an odd number of chests, you'll only have 1 row of droppers up there at the top. But just place repeaters behind all of the droppers connected together with dust. And then this bottommost row is missing a dropper over there on that side. But again, just place repeaters behind every dropper connected with dust. So this bottommost row will have 1 less repeater and 1 less dust, which also prevents it from connecting with that redstone over there. Those should not be connected. Also, the repeaters should be aligned with the redstone torches. The repeaters need to be directly behind the droppers that have the torches on the side. Now on the second row, not the bottom row, we're going to count 15 starting with that dust right there, closest to the input. And on the 15th dust, we're going to place a marker block diagonally down from the block that dust is placed on. Remember that the bottommost row has one less dust and repeater, so don't count from the bottom row. Count from this second row. And if you have less than 15 cells, it doesn't matter where you put this marker block. But then we're going to place more marker blocks aligned with each other, 2 rows apart. So there will be 3 blocks in between all of the marker blocks, or 2 rows in between the marker blocks. And if your topmost marker block is like you see here, where it's diagonally up from this row, we need to place a solid block diagonally forward from your marker block. Because on all of these marker blocks, we're going to place a repeater. And a repeater will power the dust that is above and below the block that the repeater is powering. So one repeater will power 2 rows of dust. And it can power up to 15 dust in each direction, which is why we need to count out 15 from the first side, and why one cell can't be bigger than 29 chests, because one repeater can power 29 total blocks. But now we're going to go back and then diagonally up with glass and redstone dust. The glass won't pinch the dust, which will allow you to connect all of these repeaters together by just going back and forth with glass and dust going all the way up. So now all these repeaters are tied together through that glass line. Then we're going to place a repeater 1 block away from this glass line, and then connect dust from that repeater over to the side of that block right there. So now the clock will power that entire glass row, which will power all of the redstone in the machine. Now all that's left is to load the items that you want to sort for into all of these chests. Again, this is a slot allocated sorter, so every slot of every chest needs to have at least 1 item. Because if there's any empty slots, then any item can enter that empty slot. Whereas if there are no empty slots, only items that stack with the items in the chest will enter that chest. Now, if you want to customize this further, if you want it to bend around a corner, or loop to the other side of the room, or zigzag, or be wider than 29 chests, essentially all we're going to do is build another one of these, completely separate, and then just attach them together. So if you want it to curve around a corner, we just duplicate what we've already built at any size and just stick it here, including the glass diagonal thing to power all of the rows. Now all we have to really do is connect the item flow from the first one to the second one. So in this case, you don't need the overflow because you want the items to go straight from the first section into the second one. So we just need to tie that topmost corner dropper into this first barrel right here. In any way, you just attach hoppers from that barrel in any orientation over to this dropper, so that the dropper is pushing items into the hoppers, which are then moving those items over into the next system. So regardless of where you put these and how many you put, if you have 14 corners, you just connect the last dropper of each section to the first barrel of the next section using hoppers. And remember, at the very, very end of the very last one, we still want to have overflow. We want to have chests that don't have any redstone behind them, that just have hoppers pushing items freely into those chests, connected to the very last topmost dropper of the last system. For items that get full or skipped or that aren't being sorted for. Now we just need to hook the redstone from the very first clock over to the new systems. So this backmost row right here that isn't connected to anything, we're going to place a temporary lever and turn it on, just so that we can see where the signal dies out. Then this first bottommost glass needs to be switched with a solid block if you're playing on Java. Because on Java, redstone dust cannot travel down glass. So just switch that out for a solid block, doesn't matter if you're on Bedrock or Java, and just run redstone dust from this line over to the next glass tower. And so no matter how many glass towers you have, how many sections you have, just run that line over so it connects to all of the glass towers without connecting to any other dust in the system. It's just one single line only connected to the glass towers. And then place repeaters to refresh the signal so it makes it from, start to finish. And so all of the dust is powered from this single backmost line. And then go out and break your temporary lever because you don't need it anymore. If you make this super duper huge, like you see here, or bigger, then this automated system won't actually activate long enough to clear all of the items, meaning that some of the items will be left idle in the hoppers and droppers in the back. So we can add a lever on an optional lamp that triggers this sticky piston. The lamp is just so we can see if the lever is turned on or not, but that lever activating that piston will activate the entire machine, which will flush any items that are left idle. But just because items are left idle doesn't mean that they're building up. In fact, they will flush themselves every time you put items through the system. So it's not causing any problems. Just like a couple of items will be left idle occasionally in the back if you make this super huge. And also, if you make this wider than 29 chests, and you want them to connect flushly, where all of the dust ends up connected, the repeaters on the glass tower need to be 30 blocks apart. So 28 blocks of air in between each repeater. Because you don't want to have any of the dust in the entire machine to be activated by more than one repeater. So if for some crazy reason you want this to be longer than 29 chests, just keep that in mind. Measure 28 air blocks in between your repeaters. But that's all we got for this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, share, and subscribe. Always remember that you are totally awesome. But above all, don't forget to have fun. Bye-bye.